that was the idea that we got together with. So West Cork Tourism, as it existed, formed the West Cork Tourism Co-Operative, and most of you here in the story or in the room know that story, where effectively 300 odd businesses came together and put up €10,000 each with a view to forming the cooperative. We were very imaginative in our name of the cooperative, the West Cork Tourism Cooperative. But the story got much bigger than West Cork at that point, and we started to get people who put in money from South Wales, from the city, from South Kerry, etc., etc. And I think it really captured the popular imagination in terms of what was possible. I don't think we did anything truly remarkable, but what we did do, I think, as a group, is we showed leadership and we showed what was possible. And I think people, in particular early last year, were looking for that sense of direction and that sense of leadership. And I think they were, enthused by our story and willing to come behind it. On the basis of the shareholding, we've approximately got about a membership of probably more than 500 people. As we got down into the smaller and smaller businesses, what we found is that people tended to syndicate a share. So I think we have one share with 42 small businesses in one village inside it, and then we've lots of single shareholders. And I think we've only one or two shareholders who've more than one share, and in that case it's 2 shares. So it really is a mass movement of people who, I would say, look at the broader impact of the region. So we've got auctioneers, publicans, all sorts of businesses that you wouldn't think would be a logical fit to go into a tourism cooperative, but people who recognise the benefit for their businesses and for their community. So with that, we formed Line late last summer, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the cooperative, and we entered into an arrangement to purchase the MV Julia, which was in a liquidation situation in Finland. And I suppose one of the things that fell for us, even though it was a very, very difficult time, is that the purchase price on the type of ship we got was a real steal. One of the other ferry operators that's currently operating in the Irish Sea bought a sister ship of the Julia. By the time they were bought and fitted out, they spent somewhere in the region of about 50 million, yet she's only 2 years younger than the Julia. We did everything for probably somewhere in the order of 12 million by the time we had everything done. So we really did manage to get ourselves a deal. And in many ways, she's every bit as fine a ship as her sister ship. For me personally, it was a challenging time. I was involved in 2 startups in the 1 year. My own startup that I was involved in was called Longship, and everybody thought that somehow it was involved in the shipping industry. In fact, it's an energy management company, and it's got nothing to do with shipping. And I had the name Longship in place ever before I got involved with Line and all the rest of it. I suppose the common thread for me was that over the course of 2009, I was on the Genesis Enterprise program based out on the Rubicon campus in CIT. And for those of you who don't know that is a truly magnificent program run by Denise Kennedy out there. And it's currently shortlisted as one of the top enterprise development programs in Europe, and I think very much deserves so. And in many ways it was interesting for me at a personal level, because a lot of the challenges that Line faced, which in many ways were much bigger problems, were similar to the ones being faced at Longship. I suppose in terms of our funding needs, once we had the deal done with the bank in Finland, we then recognise that there was further funding required both in 2010 and 2011. Now, it became quite frustrating because we knew that in 2010, for example, that we needed somewhere in the region of about 2.5 million in terms of getting our working capital up and running. Banking facilities in Ireland were effectively closed to us, and we were then, looking to raise money by way of securing bonds over the ship, and I'll go through the detail a little bit. But what we could see was that the immediate benefit to the region was in the order of 35 million. In 2011, the immediate benefit to the region was the order of 50 million. Our requirement for the following winter was about 1.5 million in working capital. And yet it was a real challenge. We now had our ship, she was down in Horgan's Quay, and we still had a lot of funding to do. And I suppose that was a very, very stressful time for everybody involved in the co-op and in Line. And in terms of putting that fundraising together, it appears that every meeting we went to, top of the agenda was funding, funding, funding. And yet most people were looking at the ship down in Horgan's Quay and patties from the back and saying, what a great job you've done, you know, and you're ready to sail, so to speak. We actually went about, I suppose, the funding side of things in a number of ways, and I'll give you kind of the breakdown. To start with, and it's interesting, a lot of the funding that we actually put together for the project was outside of Ireland. And I think that was interesting. We raised just over 6 million by way of debt from a Finnish bank, who were a community bank, and I think kind of bought into the ethos of what we're trying to do. Finance Wales funded us to the tune of about 2 million, again by way of debt finance. They're effectively a VC type arm of the Welsh government. So they were looking, I suppose, at the social implications for South Wales, as well as looking for the financial return. Now, very much did the due diligence with a view to getting the financial return. Enterprise Ireland, which has been mentioned in the media, have also agreed to put some money into the project, again by way of debt. The councils, both City Council, the County Council and Kerry County Council, bought some bonds in the project, and we're very grateful for what they did there. West Cork Foods, Clothing Dairies were one of the key people who came on board early on in terms of our bonds, and the Port of Cork were also great supporters, as they were throughout the project. So with that, we had our ship and we had our funding in place for total funding of somewhere in the region of 13.5 million. So we are at this stage, I would suggest, fully funded in terms of what we need to do for the next year or two. So we were effectively almost at the starting line. We were starting to feel good about ourselves. I won Cork Person of the Year, which was really I accepted on behalf of the entire project. And I think we were getting ready for a successful launch on the 1st of March. And I suppose, as Caesar said, beware the Ides of March. And we certainly found out about it very, very quickly. We had a number of, I suppose, what were in hindsight relatively minor problems. We had a small accident going to the dry dock that kind of impacted into our critical path and pushed us back a few days. And then once we actually got onto the schedule in the early days of March, we had a little controller that was affecting our prop. The thing was probably no bigger than the mobile phone in my hand here, and it impacted a vessel that was 8,000 tons. But I suppose it's like anything, we had gotten so far and we weren't going to give up. And certainly, the first 2 weeks in March were difficult, I think, for everybody involved in Fastnet Line and for everybody involved in the co-op. But I suppose, how do you get through those early challenges? And I suppose it really all comes back to people. We had a great team in terms of Fastnet Line. Tom Barrett, our CEO, had put together a fantastic team. And the challenge for Tom was enormous in that he effectively was the second employee in the company when she sailed in here in October, and by the 1st of March we were almost 100 people inside the company. And just to scale up an organisation at that type of speed is a huge challenge, and the hours that Tom and his team and everybody involved in the co-op put into making this a reality cannot be underestimated. And I suppose by getting focused on the problem and having the confidence that we had come this far and we weren't going to fail, by the middle of March we were on schedule and back running, and we haven't missed a sailing since. I said to Ger and Conor that I'd look to the future a little and look to the next 10 years in terms of what are the challenges for Fastnet Line as we go forward. And I suppose the biggest challenge, and it's like Tony Blair when he won the election for the first time for Labour, they said what made him different to previous Labour leaders was that the following day he pulled everyone together and said, we're now planning for the next election.